welcome to the Inside Byte podcast. My name is Tim Schaefer, and this is not the first Inside Byte podcast episode, but we're just going to pretend that first episode never happened because that was way back in 2016, and basically ever since then I've been trying to get people on board doing a podcast with me, and every time I attempt, even if someone agrees to it and we have the time for it and we get together, it never really turns into anything and it just goes into chaos. And after years and years of trying, I'm just saying, hey, forget about it. I'll just do it myself. That way I can have a controlled environment anyway. If people come onto the show, they come onto the show, but we're just going to go solo. So, welcome to the first episode yet again of the Inside Byte podcast. Today, I wanted to go over a pretty complex subject. Basically, what is it over anything else that draws me into entertainment? Whether it's a book, a movie, a video game. What is it that has me watching it, and what is drawing me in? What is the major thread that I'm into over anything else on what attracts me to the medium of it? So, let's say I was huge into gore, right? Oh, I would love watching this and I would love reading this because some dude got his head chopped off and blood flied all over the wall, right? Well, I wanted to talk about this because I've been thinking about this for years, and I've told many people this, and it makes sense considering all the different things that I'm into across the different mediums on what I like and what I don't. And what draws me in over anything else is the complications of it. So let me explain that a bit. I think a good way of explaining it is just listing some of them, and I think you'll understand a common thread between them all if you know the references I'm pulling from. So I am very big into The Matrix, right? Not just the first film, but all of it. All three movies, the Animatrix movie. Anything you can throw my way, the better. Same with Metal Gear Solid. Same with Kingdom Hearts. I want things to where I have to dig deep, and I'm constantly questioning, who is this person? Why is this person doing this? What's going on in the world? Why does the world work like this? The more complicated you can present your story to me, almost the better it is for me. Now, it needs to be good. It needs to, technically, if I was to spend years trying to figure it all out, it would ultimately make sense in the end, or at the very least, make me believe that if I keep digging, it will make sense in the end. Kingdom Hearts, I'm thinking of you. But it does a good job on, well, if I just understood this backstory with this character, I could understand why this action took place years later. And that drive is what has me playing it and paying attention to it. So, another game I recently beat was Nier Automata. Now, it is a sequel to Nier, which is now Nier Replicant, that I need to play because I got its sequel and I need to know what happened before then. But now I'm incredibly interested because after playing his sequel, it definitely goes very deep onto how humanity treats each other, how humanity even works, where humanity even came from. Is humans the most important thing to even exist? Is something that humanity creates not as good as humanity themselves? All of those types of questions too. I'm very big into psychology, so I'm very big into how the mind works, how people express their emotions, why they express certain emotions, what triggers them, what makes someone angry or sad, depressed, happy, very joyful, right? What are all these things that are driving individuals to live better or live worse? Now, I am not going as far as to say I need the ultimate answer of life kind of level, like why do we exist and all of that. I more am just into why a person may behave a certain way when you do things, how the smallest of things can make the biggest impacts on a person, whether they even recognize them or not. Things like that. A good example with a medium, a book, it is called The Giver, and it recently was turned into a movie. The movie isn't great. It's okay, but if you can look past how well the movie was made or how well the acting was and just watch it for the premise of the movie and just understanding the world setting and the characters, right? The blueprint of the film, the blueprint of its story, that is such a compelling story and draws me in a lot. Now, I think that is the start of all of this, is The Giver. The start of why I'm into The Matrix, why I'm into Metal Gear Solid, while I'm into, and it goes, actually Metal Gear Solid, it goes well beyond Metal Gear Solid. It goes into Metal Gear, which leads into Metal Gear Solid, if you know what I'm talking about, but I digress. I think The Giver is the spark of it all, because I was in 5th grade, and I remember it very clearly. Now, our teacher, it's pretty wild. I was actually in a Christian school, and this Christian school was pretty wild, and I could go into many stories, and I may be sidestepping here a bit, but we're going to go ahead and sidestep just to give some more context. The school was very strict, the staff was like almost mean to the children. It felt very like we were 22 in military, but yet we were in 3rd grade. We didn't even know what was even going on in the world, but yet we can't go up to scratch our nose or we will be disciplined accordingly. And it was very weird. Here's a good example. Okay, I have to use the bathroom. Well, I can't just get up and use the bathroom. There are bathroom intervals throughout the day. So, okay, we go to the bathroom, let's say 1 o'clock. Well, you better hope your cycle on you using the bathroom is at 1 o'clock, because if you don't have to go then, it is very hard to leave at 2:15 to then go to the bathroom. Now, it's not as far as to say, okay, you have to get up, go to the bathroom, it's 2:15. They won't let you and you pee your pants. But is this you were just a kid and they're pressing it very hard onto, hey, you really should have gone when we all went. I will let you go because I don't want you peeing on the floor, but I'm going to judge you because you didn't go then. Make you feel bad because you didn't go then. That kind of thing. That underlining, how dare you take advantage of the time that I've given you to do X, Y, and Z. Again, very military-like. But we, again, don't really understand the world, much less understand exactly where you're even trying to come from and what you're even trying to teach us. And there's give and take with everything, and there's a very fine line to discipline. They definitely took it very far. Another story, one that I'll always remember, we were using markers. I'm not sure exactly what. I think this was 3rd grade, and I am using markers on a piece of paper. Everyone's using markers, but I'm going over a section because I used the wrong color, then I try to use the right color, but I'm trying to color it so much that it makes the previous color sort of go away because I added so much of the new color sort of mindset I was having in like 3rd grade. I was trying to put green over a black or something like that, right? So I'm using a ton. Teacher is like, "What are you doing?" Walks over to me, pulls up the paper. There's marker all over the desk. It like bled through the paper, right? Teacher said I was writing all over the desk on purpose. Tells me to go to the principal's office. Anytime we went to the principal's office, we have to explain why we're there. They do not give the principal any context. It's up to us to give all the context when we arrive there. So many times they would try to catch kids in a lie so then they can get them into more trouble. So after a year or two of that, I knew I just had to be honest, which that in itself, that's kind of a good idea. But again, they always just take things way too far. Anyway, I explained the situation. He makes me walk back to the classroom. They're actually in PE at the time. And he's going on and on about how I am damaging God's property and how dare I am being very malicious and rude. The attitudes that I'm portraying today are the exact attitudes that will send me to hell and all that crazy crap, right? And when I even begin to try to say, hey, it was accident, I am back talking and I'm not even allowed to speak. So he is down my throat, yelling at me, calling me a bunch of names, saying I'm not going to get anywhere with my life, all that kind of mindset. And I can't say anything back or I will get in more trouble and I will get kicked out of the school. And it will be this whole big fiasco, and then I'll get in trouble at home and all of that. So I remember just sitting there, and he's telling me that kids that have done this in the past, he has forced them to use sandpaper on the desk so much that their knuckles bled, and just going extreme with it. But he wasn't talking in a like, hey, you really need to act better because I want to see you be good in your future. It was a very like, how dare you do this? And very angry and just yelling at me, to the point where I just start crying because I'm in 3rd grade and someone's just being very mean to me. And then I'm just very sad, and it turns into things like that. And it doesn't sound so major looking back on it, but I remember how it made me feel at the time like I was just the lowest thing on planet Earth kind of mind. So back to my original point though. So I'm in this Christian school. I'm in 5th grade now at this point. This is one of the first times I actually had a teacher we all liked, and she actually treated us very well. And so it was a very different vibe. And so why I said all that previous stuff is because I wanted you all to understand why I admire this teacher as much as I did, because it was like a breath of fresh air of someone who actually cared about us and someone who was actually really nice to us. We all learned so much more that year than pretty much all years prior, I felt. A lot of the things that she presented to us stuck with me for pretty much the rest of my life. So one thing she would do was every Friday for an hour to 2 hours, she would continue reading a book that she was reading to the whole class. And we could lay our heads down and take a nap, or we could just pay attention to the books. And I remember a lot of times I would lay my head down as if to go to sleep, but I was listening the entire time. And she read us, I remember one book, Thin Red Line, but I wasn't really into war movies or stories that much. But I remember actually paying attention to that, only because, again, it was her, and I liked her as a teacher a lot. But again, so she read us The Giver, and thinking back, I think that book is a lot more mature than a 5th grade book, even though it's written at a 5th grade level. But it's hard to say because it's as deep as you want to take it and your mind wants to take it, because for most people, it was just yet another book, but it hit me a lot different. I can't really say it was too mature, like the teacher shouldn't have done that, but at least for me, it terrified me in a lot of ways, and I remember having a lot of dreams on it, but at the same time, it completely changed my outlook on life for the better, so I'm very glad that she did it. But man, the themes go deep with that book. That was the very first time that I have heard a piece of entertainment that completely changed my outlook on life prior to me hearing this book. So I don't want to explain the whole book here, but I can go over some key points so you understand what I'm getting at, why my 5th grade mind was working as hard as it was, because it was such crazy thoughts that I would never think were even possible in humanity prior, or how dark humanity could really be towards each other. Examples being, so in this story, it's a black and white world. Think like Pleasantville, if you ever seen that movie, to where you think everything is going perfectly and it's this black and white reality, and meaning like people are actually only seeing black or white, like as if you're watching an old TV show that's in black and white. because the very moment you introduce color, there's too many variables on how you could see something, and some of those could lead to bad things, so we're just going to remove it. Anything that could lead to something bad happening, we're going to remove it altogether, to pretty much to the point where they're just like living robot lives with no freedoms whatsoever. They are injected every morning to kill their emotional level. They're all assigned what they're going to do for the rest of their lives. Stuff like that, right? Well, there would even be situations to where, oh, we're going to send people off into the unknown, basically killing them. But they don't say it. They just say, well, we're just sending them off. They do it in very clever ways to where you don't really get what's going on until pretty much the very end of the book, and then even then a lot of people didn't really get it, and you kind of have to read it a second or third or fourth time, and then it all starts clicking and making sense. One big thing being, okay, you have people that are designated to carry babies for the community, right? So they would get pregnant by whoever, right? Just science lab babies. And then once they had the child, they just gave the child over to people that were designated parents for the rest of their life. They get kids go, they get new kids until they get too old, and then get sent off into the unknown, right? Well, they could even be pregnant with the child and there be a small complication and they just end it immediately, or right after they have the baby, right? They monitor it for a year and before they give it to the parent, and if it shows any signs of weaknesses, they off the child. Oh, it's 2 pounds too heavy, 2 pounds too light, let's send it off, kind of situation. In the book, it's not portraying it in this manner. You know, in the book, it's just following the life of like 3 kids that are friends, and they just see a little bit here and a little bit there, and you don't really get what's actually going on until you pretty much read between the lines, and it takes a lot to actually get what's really going on, you know. I felt about halfway through the book that I was catching on into what was going on, and I remember even talking to my friends in the class at the time about how wild it was, and I was so drawn into it, and no one seemed to really care, and I felt alone in just how admired I was by this story. I think that was the start of all of this. Ever since that moment, anytime I am watching a show, watching a movie, playing a video game, when it has themes of something much deeper than what appears going on in the background, I immediately get drawn in. The better the writer, the better the director, right? That can portray it in such a way to where it gives just enough for you to want to dig deeper. That very fine line of not too deep, not too light, just teasing you along so you want to know more. I think The Matrix, that came out in 1999. I was born in 88, so I was 11 when the movie came out. I probably saw it when I was 12 or 13. I don't think I saw it like right on release, but it was that same kind of deal to where, oh, there's actually way more going on under the surface than what's currently being presented to everybody else kind of movie, And even all of the information that's presented to the viewer isn't even the whole truth. You think, you're like, oh, the very moment Morpheus shows Neo the true reality, you think, oh, well, I get it now. But the fact that there's still 30 other layers even underneath that you can keep digging through and getting more info than the average other viewer if you want to look for the information. I love that stuff. I remember when the sequel came out, and I was so looking forward to it, but it didn't really do much for me, right? I did get some more information, but they put so much action into it. The first movie does have a lot of action, but there is story all around that action, and even during the action, there's way more reasons for the action, to where in the second film, it felt like it was just action for action's sake. I was bored through most of it till the architect stuff, right? And then that couldn't be any more interesting than it was the most interesting part of the Matrix as a whole that I've seen, just that one little segment. That's what I mean. Like, I wasn't blown away by all the cool action scenes they were able to pull off that no one's ever done prior to that, which kudos to them. That took a lot of talent and effort, and the people who shot the film, the actors, all of that. But I'm in it to have it work my mind, you know. I then felt the third movie was a good balance yet again between action but for a greater purpose, and I was entertained all throughout it. It actually had a lot more story and weirdness than even one did. So one was the perfect balance between what is going on and wow, that's a cool action scene, but I care way more about wow, what's going on. So the third movie appealed to me a lot more because you got to see even more of a bigger picture of Zion and the machines and all of that than ever before. And then the Animatrix film, it's actually 5 short stories sort of wrapped up into one film. That may be my favorite because I got to see even more backstory and understanding why the machines even revolted in the first place, and getting a better grasp onto who and how and why and what, you know. And that's what I want to see, and that's what interests me more than anything else. So, sounds like I'm shooting off topic, but you'll understand in a second. PS5 and Xbox Series X/S is out now. But last generation, right, Xbox One, PS4, well, my 2 favorite PS4 games are Death Stranding and Detroit Become Human, because they are straight up those vibes that I'm talking about prior, to where you just can't wait to know what's going to happen next. Why is it happening? You've been able to dig as far as you possibly can into both of those. With Detroit Become Human, it spiderwebs out of control on the amount of options and the way things can play out. But that isn't why I like it. Why I like it is just the themes it's trying to portray to the viewer. The battle of humanity versus AI. Are we going too far with AI? Should we treat them like humans? All of that. It hit all of the stuff that the Matrix hit on, but I felt it went even deeper than the Matrix, only because there was just much more of it, right? So the Matrix, you just have 3 films, and a Matrix, okay, 4 films, but that's still just 2 hours apiece. What is that, right? Detroit Become Human is about 30 to 40 hours. So just by that alone, you can dig deeper. And then, like I'm saying, it spider webs. So why the spider webbing is cool is not just because, oh, I can decide what's going to happen to this character or that character, which is neat. But the cooler part is the possibilities of finding out that much more information on why the world is the way it is, understanding the message that the creators are trying to tell its viewer with that much more detail, because a 40-hour game now can turn into a 1,000-hour game if you really wanted it to be, which is very impressive. And then Death Stranding, well, let's go back to Metal Gear Solid because it is the same guy, Hideo Kojima, right? Well, again, I said Metal Gear Solid, but let's just say Metal Gear. So you have Metal Gear, right? And you have Metal Gear 2. Well, in Metal Gear 1, it was just very basic. It was for the arcade. They ported it to NES. The same with the second one. And I say arcade, I can't remember the actual name of the machine. It was an M2 or something like that. Anyway, in the first one, you're Snake. You defeat Big Boss at the end of the game. Some very run-of-the-mill action military type game. You defeat the boss. The end. There's not really much to it. There is some knowing all of the other context of the games, and then you getting a few lines of dialogue that make way bigger sense once you know what else is going on. But at that time, it felt like just standard action game, right? Second game comes out. Oh, you thought Big Boss was dead? He's not. He's back alive. You kill him a second time, right? And then Metal Gear Solid comes out. Now, Metal Gear Solid is PlayStation 1 when that releases. Everything prior to that was on cartridges, and this was the first time we're seeing games on a full CD. So instead of 8 or 16 megabytes, it is now 700 megabytes of space to be filled. So they fill it with cutscenes, voice acting, incredible music, and it feels like the very first time we're getting a cinematic experience, right? And so he takes these Metal Gear games and turns it into this very convoluted, very confusing sort of film, but something you can play through as well. Looking back on it, the gameplay wasn't crazy good. At the time there was nothing else quite like it. It was a very cool stealth game. Things can age horribly when it's a system that's just popping into 3D for the first time. But that game sold millions of copies, changed gaming forever kind of level. Huge praise, because again, it was the first cinematic experience we got with a video game. Same thing, he ups the ante again with the second one right when PS2 hits. Now instead of 700 megabytes, we have a 4 gig DVD to mess with, and can go that much even further into how much you can give the player. But he was all about that sort of Matrix approach where things aren't what they seem. There's so much going on behind the scenes. What are this character's true intentions? What is the government's true intention? Is the American government good, bad? Again, it always kind of ends up in a gray area to where some people are good, some people are bad. And instead of looking towards a group and trying to blame the whole group, you just have to sort of blame individuals, just like we treat how to solve racism, how to solve sexism, right? We can't just make a blanket statement. This is a type of person, so they must be like this. Metal Gear Solid hits all of that. And you wouldn't even think it would if you were seeing it from the outside unless you played it all the way through, because it seems so goofy, right? Its villains are on fire, they have telekinetic powers, they are sniper wolves, right? Very Japanese, very crazy stuff. A guy that has a raven he can control that loves to be in a tank, and you can withstand multiple tank missiles, and you're shooting missiles back at him. But you have to also deal with his bird. It's weird stuff, Psycho Mantis. But there is very deep underlining messages on how society works. What's even good? What's even bad? Who can you trust? Who's good or who's bad? Things that you spend years trying to figure out its lore and wanting to figure out its lore because it is so enticing and so well told of a story that you can't help but want to dig deeper. So he does Death Stranding, very new IP. He's been working with Metal Gear for over 20 years now at this point, and now it's a whole original new project, and he gets Norman Reedus on board, which does an amazing job on the acting side for the main character. But it is a very, very, very weird game. Monsters with tentacles that look like you might as well be watching a hentai. Once you start paying attention to what's really going on and the message is trying to portray to you, the deeper you want to dig and the deeper you can dig. I just can't get enough of these types of medias. The latest game that recently came out that's in the same sort of vein is Final Fantasy VII Remake. Now, Final Fantasy VII does go really deep, and it's mainly because of its compilation and not necessarily the game itself. The game itself does go deep, but it doesn't go to the levels of Matrix deep or Metal Gear Solid deep, but it's about 70% there. It's not Death Stranding deep, but it is deep. Once all these other releases, Advent Children, Dirge of Cerberus, the PSP game with Zack that I can't think of the name of right now, Crisis Core, and all of those extra pieces of media now with the original game and thought becomes way much deeper than you would ever imagine. And when you go back and play that original game, you see all of that stuff there that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. So a game that you didn't even realize was that deep was super deep, but because you didn't understand the context of that stuff, you didn't see it as being deep. And that's what makes Final Fantasy VII insanely cool to me. It actually is my favorite video game of all time, second being Metal Gear Solid 4, because again, I'm just all about this stuff. So Final Fantasy VII Remake, and it has this crazy weird twist thingy on, is it a remake, is it not, sort of deal. And I don't want to get into all of that because it is very, very spoilery, but I could sit and talk about the Final Fantasy VII story for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. I could spend 5 podcasts, an hour apiece, talking about it and still feel like I didn't explain everything. And I think that's why it's my favorite piece of media to this day. What's wild is, again, it's not because all those other games is the while Final Fantasy VII is my favorite. It only got me to understand what was even going on in Final Fantasy VII that I missed. If I would have played it when I was older, I played Final Fantasy VII, I'm 11, 12, 13 years old, and I only got to see the context of the other things after the fact, which then made me go back and then noticed all of the things it was really trying to tell that I just missed. I don't know if you could have just done Final Fantasy VII and not add anything more and it would have been good for it or bad for it, and that's a whole discussion on its own. I think not. I think just give me as much as you can possibly give me. Even if it's bad, like Dirge of Cerberus is a bad game, but it gave a lot of context to like Omega that you wouldn't even know if you not played it, but yet it talks about it in the original game. And it just only makes the property that much better, at least in my opinion. So I do have something to look forward to play on PS5 because the Yuffie DLC is arriving next month, and I'm going to be all over that because it's the next part of the story that takes place, after Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's like Remake 1.1. Hopefully it's not too long before 2 comes out, because now at least they have the game engine and a lot of assets already. And I'm trying to think what else I'm looking forward to in this same vein. The only thing that I see is Tales of Arise, which would surprise some people, but Tales of games do go very deep and darker than people give them credit for. You can just skip the stuff or dig deep into the stuff, all dependent on if you just care or not. I know another good one, and I'm currently playing it right now, Mass Effect Legendary Edition, because I played Mass Effect, a little here and there, but not much at original release. But I'm actually playing through them now, beat 1. I'm about 8 hours into 2. And wow, I am loving it again because of how well the writing is and how deep its world setting is. And I say world setting, more like universe setting, because it's multiple planets and such and multiple galaxies. But man, are there crazy things at stake? And does it really present you with really hard decisions that question good and bad, that deep conflict on what makes a human and all of that stuff. So I think that will do it for the first episode. I just really wanted to gush about what drives me with media. The more people can throw my way on other things I will enjoy because of this, the better. And before I go, I just thought of one. Attack on Titan goes very deep and very wild, and again gives you very little as you go, and you could just watch it and just enjoy it for the action, right? And it sort of draws people in that aren't really into the crazy deep lore stuff for the action, but I'm into it because I'm just needing to know where they're coming from, why is it happening, all of that stuff. And I'm watching episode by episode, in getting a little bit more info here, but then having even more questions brought up as the episode finishes. And it's that perfect balance of like, oh, I understand this, but now there's 6 other questions that I have. I love that stuff. So again, throw all that stuff my way if you can, and I'll see you guys later.